emergency exit to your seating area. Thank you, and enjoy the performance.
Hello, I'm Richard Bryant, Executive Director of Musco Center for the Arts at Chapman University. This evening, I welcome you back to our At the Musco online series, where you can connect in real time with faculty, students, professional artists, and one another, all engaged in what we call the art of community. The Hilbert Museum of California Art at Chapman University opened its doors the same year Musco Center opened in 2016. And since then, we've partnered with this outstanding art museum on several events and projects. Today, we're pleased to partner once again with the Hilbert Museum to offer you a panel of experts discussing one of the most groundbreaking films in the Disney and animation canon. It's Who Framed Roger Rabbit? It's a movie that completely shattered the mold when it was first released in 1988, and it continues to be recognized as an iconic landmark in animation history. To tell you more, I'm honored to introduce my friend and colleague, Mary Platt, Director of the Hilbert Museum of California Art. We hope you enjoy this program. And now, over to the Hilbert Museum. Here's Mary.
Thanks, Richard. Hi, I'm Mary Platt, Director of the Hilbert Museum of California Art here at Chapman University. And we're so pleased to partner with the Musco Center for the Arts on what promises to be a very fun and enlightening expert panel discussion. There's some zaniness going on the walls behind me. Can you see it? You might even say that there's some hijinks happening. We're standing in the middle of the Hilbert Museum's current exhibition, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? A collection of original hand-painted cels on photographic backgrounds from the groundbreaking animated classic, on generous loan to us from collectors Bill Heeter and Christy Correa of Colorado. If you've visited the Hilbert Museum, and I hope that you will, you'll know that we're a museum dedicated to the fine art of California representational painters, icons such as Millard Sheets, Emil Cosa Jr., and Rex Brandt, among many others. But we're also a home for an equally important facet of California art, the art of Hollywood, notably the art of the great animators. Many fine artists actually came to California in the 1930s and 40s to work in the movie industry. And we are unique among museums in displaying their fine art as well as their animation art. The very best known studio of these, of course, was Walt Disney's. In 1988, Disney's Touchstone Pictures released an animated movie, the likes of which had never been seen before. Roger Rabbit broke new ground in so many ways that you'll hear about in this panel discussion, which draws together experts who worked on the movie and who know many things and many background stories about it. So listen and enjoy, and I hope that you'll come and see the exhibition here at the Hilbert Museum, which is up until February 20th, 2021. We are open now to the public. Check our website at hilbertmuseum.org for updated opening hours, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And now, over to my friend and colleague, Napoleon Gladney. Hey, Napoleon.
Thank you so much, Mary and Richard. Good evening and welcome to At the Musco Online. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you have joined us for a previous event, welcome back. Please take a moment to like, follow, and subscribe to Musco Center on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also join our email list for updates on new happenings and online events just like this one at themusco.org. Remember that you can ask your burning questions in the chat because I will be back at the end of the conversation to get them answered by our phenomenal panel. Until then, I am so honored to pass the virtual mic to our moderator this evening, Phil Machi.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Musco Center for the Arts and the Hilbert Museum, welcome to the Who Framed Roger Rabbit the making of a groundbreaking classic panel. Tonight's event runs in conjunction with the exhibit at the Hilbert Museum of California Art at Chapman University. And tonight, I am your host and moderator, Phil Machi. It is my absolute honor and privilege to present tonight's panel of esteemed creators gathered here to celebrate the 1988 film, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And that panel is made up of, in alphabetical order, one of the collectors responsible for the exhibit of original cels from the movie, Bill Heeter, acclaimed Walt Disney historian, Jeff Kurtti, animator from the film itself, Dave Spafford, and author of Who Censored Roger Rabbit, the book that inspired the film, Gary K. Wolfe. Whether born out of the hubris of man and his desire to play God, or perhaps just some grown adults keeping in touch with their inner children, there is a charming history dating back to the early 1900s of live-action animated filmmaking. Tonight, we're going to look at Who Framed Roger Rabbit on both its placement and importance in cinema history. I would like to start off with Bill. Bill, the original, hey, how you doing?
Good.
Bill, the original animated cels that are on display at the Hilbert Museum are priceless, in my opinion. How long did it take to put this collection together?
Phil, it took me about 3 days. No, it took me probably 10 to 12 years, something like that. I wasn't able to participate in the Sotheby's auction, which was really the kickoff of the release of art from Roger Rabbit, but I started picking up cels after that. And I would say it took me a good 10, 12, 15 years to kind of get the collection to the point where it is now. Actually, I still look for animation cels virtually every day, so it's still important to me.
That's fantastic. Any tips on where
Kind
to
of hurt on my bank account, frankly, but
any good tips on where to find animation cel art?
well, I can pass my phone number to you, and we can go from there. No, actually, it's kind of sad to some degree, because when I started collecting in the 80s and 90s, there were probably 30 to 40 galleries around the country that carried animation art. And really starting with kind of the dot-com bust in the late 90s, they just slowly but surely disappeared. And now there's probably less than 10 galleries in the country that really focus on animation art. And part of that's due to the fact that everything has gone digital, so there aren't animation cels anymore. But part of it's just the economics of it, and I think it's really a shame. It's disappointing to some degree.
Yeah, because what we used to get out of the whole experience was art on top of art. There was the overarching goal of making a film, but then you would just as a product of the process, you would get these wonderful pieces that people could then look at on their wall perpetually.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And I think what some people miss is the fact that a lot of these animators and people involved with the development of the cartoons they're trained classic fine artists. And I've been told that they did animation as the vocation, and they did their fine art as their avocation. And I think a lot of people forget that. It's an incredible talent. You're talking to a person who can't draw a stick person. So the fact that these people can do all the nuance and the expression and everything is pretty remarkable to me.
Well, I don't know if anyone told you, but we're going to have you draw a stick person on camera tonight. So no, I'm just kidding.
Nice to see you. Moving on.
So I want to toss it over to Jeff real quick here. Jeff, first of all, welcome. Hello.
Hello.
Dating all the way back to the year 1919, when we have Coco the Clown asking his creator if he was to be considered high art. There's this controversy that keeps happening over animation, that it's merely an amusement or novelty. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
It's one of the most bizarre and persistent thoughts in popular culture and in culture. This idea, it goes to the idea of the whole founding of the Hilbert Museum and its collections too, which is this strange idea of high art and low art, or that art that's primary purpose is mass entertainment is somehow less skillful than art that's created for the provoking of thought and reverence. I read a piece where the fellow was talking about high art and low art and said, there's a reason museums feel like temples. There's this conscious desire to separate high art and low art. As Bill said quite succinctly, these were not, people didn't go into animation because they were somehow less skilled. In many cases, because of a few things. Number one, you have to understand, as you said, that the creation of different elements and pieces of art to create a film as the final product. You have concept design and story sketches and layouts and background painting. You have layer upon layer and execution upon execution of different skilled artwork that comes together to make a final thing, which is that mass entertainment. So this idea of dismissing that as somehow less than is really bizarre to me.
Well,
and once again, the people who created all of this art, once again, they weren't somehow lesser artists. They couldn't get that great gig at MoMA or go to Paris and sit in a garret and starve and do paintings to be recognized after their death. These were working artists who were sort of blessed to come into the environment where they could create and make a living.
I'm glad you're putting out that distinction of the high and low art and the different levels, or so the perpetual ideas of fine art versus not. But I also want to point out, to your credit in bringing that up, that we also want to consider that it doesn't have to be excluding anybody. No one has to be left out. High art doesn't have to mean high society.
Well, I think that's part of the differentiation. There's an intellectual snobbery, I think, at work when you dismiss things. It's like high comedy and low comedy. I mean, comedy is comedy is comedy. They're different, but I don't think they're hierarchical. That is the thing. I don't think that there's a better than. There might be, in a certain kind of art, a better draftsmanship or a more polished execution. But once again, if art is really the creation and the vision of the artist, that's up to the individual artist. So it's a little, the other thing that I find interesting about animation as an art form that's very different from what we might consider high art is animation is a hugely collaborative form. You are not sitting in a garret creating your masterwork. You're sitting in a studio with dozens, if not hundreds, of colleagues working together to create an artistic vision. That's a very different kind of art creation as well. And one I think that requires a different skill set in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. There's everybody kind of builds on each other and what everyone can bring to the table. So that's absolutely true. That collaboration aspect, I think, it can be lost on an audience sometimes because what they're watching is this unified vision, but it came from so many people.
Well, now, isn't that an enormous skill in terms of high art? To create a finished product that does not show the hands of hundreds in the way it's presented.
Absolutely. William, or I should say Bill, I don't know why I called you William. Bill, you're not in trouble, I promise. People might ask themselves, why would I want to go see an exhibit at a museum of animation cels when I can simply put the film on and watch the film at home? So maybe you can enlighten us as to why it's a good idea.
Well, I mean, from a collector's standpoint, there's a huge difference because I can't tell you how many cels are created to make a 2-hour, an hour and a half film. But I can tell you that there are very few, what I would consider really good ones. And by that, for me, a lot of it is about the expression or the memory that that particular scene, that particular cel brings back. So when you look at any kind of animated feature or whatever, there are tens of thousands of cels, but some of them are arms or legs or eyeballs or the character's turning or it's not the primary character. So to me, a big part of the collecting is finding just that right expression, just that right scene, that it clicks the memory. Well, I'm a big fan of Warner Brothers cartoons in particular, and I remember I had an opportunity to meet Chuck Jones, which was, yeah, I mean, he was as gracious as could be, and I was absolutely intimidated and stuttering like Porky Pig. But I was able to tell him that I woke up every day and saw one particular cell in our hallway, and it made me smile every day. And to me, that's a really important part of it. So kind of the indirect answer is, yeah, there's thousands and thousands of cells. You can watch them on a television. It's a completely different experience than having, like Gary does over his shoulder, that one great scene of Roger and Jessica from the movie. Big difference.
Absolutely. And you're right. People don't know that all the audience typically knows is the sum of the parts, not the parts themselves.
Right.
Jeff, I wanted to ask you this. You know, the film came out in 1988, which was 24 years after Mary Poppins. Why was this the absolute perfect time for that film to come out?
What a multi-layered question, to be honest. Part of it is because it was 24 years after the last really significant utilization of the live action animation format. So you had a generation that grew up on Mary Poppins. So the idea of an animation live action feature was very appealing. It appealed to a great part of the audience, to a childhood memory, to a memory that made them feel something good about animation. And a lot of what I do as an historian, as an author and researcher, is context and putting a framework on the particular moment in time. When Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out, it was before The Little Mermaid. It was before the renaissance of Disney feature animation that really began as they worked through Great Mouse Detective, Oliver and Company, finding their footing. So people forget that Roger Rabbit stood out so spectacularly in many ways because of its animation, in many ways because of its utterly unique story and the sort of world that it created. Unlike Mary Poppins, where you had characters enter a cartoon world, function within that, and then leave, there was an entire reality created to Roger Rabbit where coexistence with the toons was a primary idea. And it went beyond being a gimmick. You can look at it and say, oh, what a gimmick. It's not. And of course, this harks back to the creation of Roger Rabbit, in that it made us see a world we'd probably imagined. As kids, maybe we imagined that there was this world where you walked in and all of your favorite cartoon characters lived together, worked together, coexisted. It's a genius sort of notion.
And what a beautiful...
So you had a confluence of these things, and then you had a really great film noir on top of that.
Right.
So it was great because it transcended the superficial gimmick that might draw you into the theater, and was instead this very hearty, fully cinematic experience.
And what a beautiful message for this time in our lives right now. All of these different characters able to put aside the different corporations that they originated from to appear together for one purpose. And I think that film really does a standout job of expressing that.
That was every cartoon fan's dream with this film. Was you wanted to go in and see Daffy Duck and Donald Duck at dueling keyboards. I mean, who wouldn't want to experience that?
It's the classic who would win, you know, the whole Batman Superman argument, right?
It's just interesting how many of these childhood nuances of the heart that the film plays upon. And like I said, transcending its gimmick and not being just a special effects movie, but ultimately being a pretty compelling film noir.
And it's very clever in the fact that it's playing on our nostalgia as an audience, but we're watching a period piece. So we're having nostalgia about things that haven't happened yet.
Exactly.
That's an excellent point. Well, if I could, I would like to switch things up a little bit here. And we've got some other wonderful guests that I'd like to hear their thoughts on what's going on. And of course, that includes Gary Wolf and Dave Spafford. So, you know, we mentioned the animation a moment ago, and of course, Richard Williams is rightly credited with a lot of the animation in the film. But there are other animators that were involved in making Roger Rabbit happen, and one of those is with us now, and that's Dave Spafford. And Dave, I wanted to ask you, you know, part of the enduring legacy of the film is its authenticity. So can you tell us how important it was that these individual characters were kept true to the time frame that they came from based on the film's time frame?
It was very important, and it was one of the first problems we had with the film because in my case, I was doing the Warner Brother characters in the film, and Warner Brothers wanted us to animate them in the modern style, which was the Chuck Jones style. Very, very different from the 40s style, which was mostly Bob Clampett and Tex Avery. So Warner Brothers wanted the new stuff because it was the same as their merchandise. And they wanted this film to be out and it to look like their merchandise. And so I had to, and I was adamant on the idea of we cannot do the modern style. It just won't work. And people will know it. And so what happened is they ended up saying, well, just give it a try. So I did fake animation of the Chuck Jones style, sent it off to them. They went, excellent. What I was handing in was Bob Clampett.
Oh,
and I paid a price for it after the film was over because Disney was upset with me, and so was Warner Brothers. But it had to be done. I would have quit before I would have done a modern style in a film that's about the 40s.
I mean, talk about dedication to your craft. My goodness, that's putting your job on the line at that point.
Well, and it was also in the very beginning because I did it with a couple scenes until they left me alone. But then eventually they saw the dailies and went, wait a minute, that's the old stuff, and they wanted me kicked off the film. And Spielberg and Zemeckis and everybody had a meeting with Warner Brothers, and Spielberg said that, well, if you want the Tiny Toons to happen, just let this go, because he goes, they're the same characters. The cartoons are still shown on TV, with the old style, and no one's thinking anything about it. It's the same characters, no matter what. You get those colors right. Daffy Duck is Daffy Duck. Bugs Bunny is Bugs Bunny, and he goes, "Trust me, just leave it alone." And so he kind of dropped this thing like, well, if we're gonna have to eliminate all the Warner Brother characters from this film, then we obviously aren't going to be doing Tiny Toons. And so they went, okay. And then after it was over with, they got such a rush from people buying all the old videotapes that they had me come in and say, could you do a style guide for what you did in the film? I said, you already have it. It's just, I had the original Bob Clampett model sheets, and that's what I was going with, you know.
Oh, wow.
Our go-to cartoon on Roger Rabbit was the wisecracking duck, and it's the epitome of Bob Clampett and his insaneness. I mean, and that's where you get, you know, Daffy Duck running around on the walls, and he's running so fast. I mean, we used that in the film, in the opening cartoon. Yeah. But back then in the 40s, that was the craziest thing. Daffy Duck was a lunatic who had escaped from an insane asylum. Yeah, and Bugs Bunny was a wise ass from New York who would eat and food would fall out of his mouth while he's talking. And we could not use the modern version of Bugs Bunny because he's basically, he turned into Mark Twain. He's standing up straight and looking out the side of his eyes and saying something very clever. He was in the 40s. He was like, man, he was just out of his mind. And same thing with Daffy Duck. You couldn't, if you shot Daffy Duck's head off in the 40s, he would go off laughing and jump in a pond and then come back up with his head again. It's like, you could not hurt him. Now the modern version of Daffy Duck is basically Donald Duck. He was the angry duck. And it's funny how people have gotten used to him, like, oh yeah, Daffy Duck, he's the angry duck that always is getting messed with by Bugs Bunny. And no, he was out of his mind crazy. And it was so much more fun. It was a cartoon, and
yeah, you're describing cartoon physics right there, all the stuff that they should be teaching in science class.
Yeah, exactly.
Harry, I want to ask you, because of course you're a writer, obviously. Yeah. Roger Rabbit as a film, I think part of the reason it succeeds so well is the world building that it does. As a writer, why is world building so important?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial for believability. You have to gain the trust of the reader and, in this case, of the person who's looking at the movie. And when I was building the world, let's say generically Toontown, when I was building that world, I started out with two concepts that were very dear to me from my youth. I grew up reading really gruesome true crime magazines, which my father read and which my mother let me read to improve my mind. And these would show crime scenes of actual crimes, really dead people laying on the floor. Luckily, I graduated to better quality Raymond Chandler and noir mysteries, but the mystery and noir genre was always one of my great loves. And then the other source of my reading material were comic books. I mean, what kids read? I read comic books and I watched cartoons. We didn't have television in those days, but I would go to the movie theater and watch cartoons in the movie. And I fell in love with the old, 40s, 50s cartoons. So when it came time for me to write what turned out to be my fourth novel, I wanted to combine my two loves. And of course, my two loves were noir mysteries and comic books and cartoon strips. And I'm trying to think, what kind of a thing can I do that will incorporate, hard-boiled private eye and comic books and cartoon strips. And I was watching Saturday morning cartoons on Saturday morning for research. I told my wife, purely for research. And I became fascinated, not with the cartoons, but with the commercials, because you saw cartoon characters talking to real kids and nobody seemed to think that was odd. And it was like Captain Crunch, the Tricks Rabbit, Tony the Tiger, Snap, Crackle, and Pop. And I thought, what a great idea for a book. What would you do if you had a world where cartoon characters were real? What kind of a world would that be? So I spent a year researching all of the things that cartoon characters do that would be inappropriate if a human did them, and what would happen if a cartoon character did this in a human world? Like, would you have human bars? And could a cartoon character go into a human bar? If he did, could he order a drink? Well, I think we all saw what happened when that happened in the movie. What if a human goes into a Toon bar? What does he drink? Well, he drinks Toon Tonic. And we haven't seen that yet, but maybe we will. But you have to develop rules of the world and be consistent throughout. You can't violate them because readers and audiences are smart and they're intuitive. And they will immediately lose credibility and stop believing in your story if they see something that doesn't make sense or that wouldn't happen in this world. So you have to be consistent, and that's the absolute bottom line of world building. In the movie, everything is consistent except for one thing, and I'm sworn to secrecy, but I'm going to tell you right now. All right. There's a scene in the movie in the elevator when Bob Hoskins is going down with Droopy, and the elevator drops, and Bob Hoskins pancakes against the floor.
Yeah.
Well, that violates every single rule of the world, every single one, because a human being can't do that. So why is it in there? Well, Bob Zemeckis thought it up and thought it was a pretty good joke. And so there it is, the only violation of our rule of the world.
I love that you bring up the rules, because it's a make-believe world, but you're right. Part of what makes that make-believe so special to us and ingrained in our psyches is when it's true to itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Gary, I also wanted to point out, because a moment ago, Bill was keen enough to mention you have an animation cell on your wall. What's the story behind that, I wonder?
Disney gave me that, and you can see it right up there. Disney gave me that as a thank you gift. It's it's a scene from the movie, obviously, and it's one of the few scenes with Roger and Jessica together. They're not together in a whole lot of scenes.
Right.
That happens to be drawn by Chuck Muller, who I didn't know at the time, but I later became really good friends with him. That particular cell is autographed by all the key players. It's autographed by Steve Spielberg, Bob Zemeckis, Dick Williams autographed it, Kathleen Turner autographed it, Charlie Fleischer, voice of Roger Rabbit, autographed it, and Bob Hoskins autographed it. Now, strangely enough, when Bob Hoskins passed away, I looked at that cell and his signature had vanished. Completely gone. Really, huh? Completely gone. You can look at that cell and you cannot even tell that there was a signature there.
I feel like I have to reference Acme's disappearing, reappearing ink.
Well, people have suggested that, and I'm just hoping that as the rest of them get older and pass away, that I don't wind up with an unautographed cell at some point.
Or even weirder than that, you end up with an autograph you never knew you had.
Yeah.
Gary, can I just ask, that hat and tie look kind of familiar?
Oh, the hat and the tie. This is the hat that Bob Hoskins wore in the movie. It's a Borsalino, specially altered, has a slightly higher crown. And this is Bob Hoskins' necktie. I wanted his entire suit, but he kept the wardrobe except for the hat and the necktie. And so I still wear these on only very special occasions. Yeah.
Good choice. Dave, you mentioned our two favorite ducks a moment ago. I have to ask you, can you explain a little bit about the complexity that goes into compositing a sequence like the one that's in the Ink and Paint Club?
Yeah, that was when we first looked at it, we realized there's only one way to do it, and it's going to be insanely complicated. When I ended up going over there, they'd already had filmed the two pianos, and they had done it on a stage with puppeteers underneath it, and they were rocking the pianos to the beat, and then the keys were all computerized. And so when they shot that, they then go on a down shooter and shoot a big animation size photo with registered holes on it. And so I would have every single frame of film as a photograph. So I could roll that and I could see the movement of the piano, and I could barely see the keys. And here was one of the craziest things was the contrast in photostats it's sometimes they're not the greatest photographs ever. and all of the keys became very muddy and you couldn't see the definition of them. And so we had to figure out mathematically and go, okay, well, there's a gray spot here, and there's someone's hitting the middle C, on the computer. So it's like, all right, well, and we'd have to mark that off. And so I did a lot of Daffy Duck and Donald, like kind of getting their feet and their arms on it to cover up where we couldn't see what actual key was going on. Because when you saw the film on a giant screen, you were going to go, oh, he's nowhere near the keys. But we hit every single one of them, and it was absolutely crazy. And we also realized they couldn't edit because the song was computerized and they shot the whole thing as a live thing. They realized, oh, well, this is a difficult thing to edit now. And so we kind of had to just leave it. And it just became this thing. And then we were like, it was getting crazy on what were we going to be doing with this? Because at first they thought they could edit it and, and get this size that they wanted. But then I had to go in and do all these things that were supposedly on a storyboard, and the shots were different. So I ended up, Zemeckis just said, just make it up. Just get the first scene, do it. When I had Daffy Duck fly from one side and go into another piano or something like that, I wasn't really sure what the next thing was going to be, and it was actually kind of fun. And I kind of had a blast doing it because there's, for instance, and most people don't know it, but there's like one scene where Daffy, he's just going like this, and he's playing with everything. Well, he comes up holding a dead chicken and comes down and then comes up with another dead chicken. Now he's playing the piano with two dead chickens. And we had gone to the pub at lunch, and which was the inspiration for putting that in. And all of a sudden I'm sitting there with headphones on, and I'm just kind of having fun, laughing to myself. And all of a sudden, here comes Spielberg, Zemeckis, Robert Watts, Steve Starkey, Richard Williams, Don Hahn. They were all like giving Steven like a tour through the studio. And I'm sitting here with Daffy Duck with two dead chickens. And they're going, oh my God, what are you doing? We can't be, Richard Williams going, we can't be having them play with two dead chickens. I went, well, at the end of it, their eyes are open. So he's kind of brought them back to life. And then Mac is going, oh, just leave it. He goes, he just said, leave it, and so that if you go in there, he also, I think, comes up with a hammer and ice cream. It's like whatever I could get away with, because in animation, no matter what film it is, no matter what scene it is, every animator sneaks in secret stuff.
See, I always felt like, and again, this is watching it when I first saw it years ago, I always felt like both of them, both Donald and Daffy, in that scene were arguably more scary and violent than they ever had been before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it was flat out crazy. I mean, Donald Duck is like, he gets out the cannon and tries to kill him,
Doesn't he have horns? I think he has horns.
Yeah, I put horns on him and everything. And it was, every day was on that film was a total blast, because Zemeckis, Robert Watts, and Steve Starkey, the three most important guys on the film, because they let all of the artists do what they knew was best. And they never tried to tell an animator how to be an animator or anything like that. Nobody. And if it wasn't for those three guys, that film would have never turned out the way it did. Richard Williams, he was awesomely insane, as for a cartoon guy, he was designed for it.
Yeah, I don't know if folks understand, the folks watching this, maybe there's some animation students watching, but the term animating on ones is a term that I don't think these days we get to say very often anymore. But that's exactly what Richard Williams was doing.
Yeah, animating on ones is when an action is so fast, because most animation is shot on twos, because they're very bright colors. Your eye retains the vision of the first frame shot. The second frame of the same frame is the same thing. So they shoot each one, so it's half the amount of drawings. And it works only because the cartoon characters are so bright and colorful that your eye holds on to the last image. So what happens is, but when animation is really moving fast, like that, where it's like almost like a blur, you have to put it on ones, because if you did it on twos, it almost looks like it's going like that. It's so fast motion. You put it it's 24 frames a second. If a character's just kind of doing this and talking and like that, always on twos. Always on twos.
Good to know. That's actually really helpful.
Because Richard Williams was crazy. He loved the look of everything on ones, even if you were doing a slow scene.
Yeah.
And it's haunting in a way. If you watch the Thief that he did before anybody else got their hands on it, man, I mean,
absolutely.
That film is right up there with Fantasia.
Yeah.
There's scenes in that film that are just like you're going, and because they were working on it when we were working on Roger Rabbit. He had a couple people in his studio, and we would go over there and just go, oh my God, look at all the stuff that's going on, and it's all on ones, and we're just like going, I'm going back over to the other studio.
It's an incredible achievement for sure.
Yeah, he was great.
Gary, before we wrap up our little section here, I had one last little question for you. Just want to get your thoughts on, there's all these different influences that inspired the creation of this story, from characters gone by, years gone by, and then they come together to make this one moment in time, and then that goes on to inspire brand new things. So I'd like to hear a little bit about what you think about that whole experience.
Yeah, I think what made this movie special was a couple of things. I think the technology and the talent, and Dave was alluding to it, Jeff was alluding to it. There have been live action animated movies going back time immemorial, Out of the Inkwell, Coco the Clown. There was an early, I believe, Alice in Wonderland, where Alice was a little girl and she went into Wonderland, and that was Walt Disney who did that. We had Jerry the Mouse dancing with Gene Kelly. We had the Penguins in Mary Poppins. Well, why weren't those as spectacular as this? Well, very simply, it was technology, and it was Bob Zemeckis, and it was the early animations were a stationary camera, and the animation moved in front of it, and the camera stayed still. And Bob Zemeckis, early production meetings, said, I want to shoot this like a regular movie. I'm going to move the camera, and I'm not going to lock it down. I'm going to move the camera, and you animators figure it out. Because he knew that the animators were talented enough to do that. And you can see it in the very first scene when Roger and Baby Herman are in the kitchen. The scene on the kitchen floor is black and white tile. Now, it would have been a whole lot easier to animate if it had been all white, but the animators, Dick Williams, wanted to show that they had achieved a level of technical virtuosity that had never been achieved before. Every single frame, the perspective changes on the tile. And so it has to be animated on ones, probably on halves, I don't know. But so it was technology, first of all, and talent that was brought to bear on it. But the other thing that made Roger Rabbit totally different was the message. Roger Rabbit in the book and in the movie, it is a modern Aesop's fable. It's a morality tale. It's good over evil. It's a story that's timeless. yet it's timely. It's a story about racial injustice. The Toons are discriminated against, but in the end, it's, hey, you're not better than we are. You're not worse. You're just different. So let's all get along. And I mean, what a great message especially for today.
I couldn't agree more, Gary. What a way to put a beautiful button on that. So what we're going to do now is we actually are going to bring everyone back together as a group, and I'm going to throw the virtual microphone back over to Napoleon, and we've got some questions from the audience to take now.
Catch. Thank you so much, Phil. All right. Hi, everyone. I've been listening in, and we've been getting a ton of amazing questions in the chat, both on Facebook and on YouTube. Let's just dive right in. This first question is for Gary, and it's about negotiating the book rights. What was that process like with Disney?
Well, it was fairly painless. I got a call one day. The book had not yet come out. I wrote the book in 1980. And the book didn't come out until 1981 because it takes that long for a book to get published. So in mid 1980, still no book out, I get a call at home and I answer the phone and the guy on the other end of the line says, "Is this Gary K. Wolf?" I said, "Yes, it is." He says, "This is Roy Disney." I said, "Yeah, right. Roy Disney calling me at home. What do you want? One of my friends having me off." He said, No, it's really Roy Disney. And I read your book. And I said, "Yeah, it hasn't been published yet." Well, somebody at the publisher, I never found out who, and I tried because I wanted to kiss him or her full on the lips. Somebody at the publisher sent the manuscript to Disney. Say, "I think you'd like this." And it worked its way up the chain and eventually got to Roy Disney. And he said, "Yes, I do like this. And would you be willing to have Disney turn your book into a movie?" And they gave me more money than I'd ever made for everything I'd ever written up until then. And so, of course, I said yes. And it was a very, very painless operation.
Amazing. Next question, kind of in the vein of talking about negotiations and the other characters that were in the film. To the panel, how long did it take to negotiate the non-Disney characters, and what was that process like?
Well, I can tell one story. Disney tried making this movie from 1981 when they bought the rights onward. Probably 1982 or 83, Roy Disney went to Warner Brothers, said, "Hey, we are making a live action animated movie and we'd like to have Bugs Bunny appear in it for 10 seconds. And he's going to come out and he's going to say, 'What's up, Doc?' And he's going to walk off. Will you consent to that?" And Warner Brothers told Roy Disney, "Get lost. No way is Bugs Bunny ever going to appear in a Walt Disney movie." So 3 years later, Steven Spielberg walks into Warner Brothers and makes the identical request, same request. "We're making a live action animated movie. Can we have Bugs Bunny come out and say, 'What's up, Doc?'" And Warner Brothers said, "Of course, Steven, take Bugs, take them all, take Porky. What about Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner? What about Yosemite Sam? Take them all. So it depends on who's doing the negotiation, I guess is the answer.
Exactly right. I just remember hearing for years of on again, off again. Okay, we were able to license all of these characters from Popeye and Betty Boop, from King Features Syndicate, and so on and so on. Then it got, as I recall, down to screen time.
Yeah.
If Daffy Duck was going to be on screen, he had to be on the same screen time as Donald Duck. If Bugs was going to be on, it had to be the same screen time as Mickey. So there are all of these nuances to the clearance of who could be in a scene with who else, and that level and that layering, not just of getting rights from rights holders like King Features and Warner Brothers, but then it got down into, it was like negotiating actual live talent.
Well, it's like
I get my dressing room has got to be the same size as Tom Cruise's dressing room, or that kind of stuff. It was you'd hear these stories and it was kind of crazy. You'd have to stop and say these are cartoons.
Well, they were all superstars, and they all had their contracts. And Bugs, Bugs and Mickey had to be in every scene together, and they had to have the identical same number of lines. So the animators, and Dave, you could probably speak to this, but the animators were a little ticked about this. And so in the scene when they're parachuting down, the animators decided, as one of your gags in the margins, one of these little things that they insert in to amuse themselves, to have Mickey give Bugs the finger.
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah, did you do that? Well,
Yeah, what happened was I was getting heat from Disney, Warner Brothers. They had pulled the Toontown section and brought it back to LA because Disney wanted the animation department was so upset that the film wasn't being done there. So they pulled back the Toontown section, and the last scenes that I was doing were in Toontown. So I had to go back, and I was really upset over that. I wanted to stay in with the crew in England and finish the film off. So I came back, and the first scene I had to do was Bugs Bunny falling from the sky, Mickey Mouse. And I was, and they were like going, okay, they've got to have the same thing. And I'm just going, are you kidding me? And so, and then they also said, and we don't want you to move Bugs Bunny around like you did with Daffy Duck, and it was crazy stuff. So that's why I went, okay. And if you look at him, it's like he's laying down on an imaginary couch before he pulls this chute. He's doing absolutely nothing. He's got his hands like this, and he's going la da 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 dee, and then then I had him go, man, a stinker, but several of the frames were, was and but it was, and then and so when I had Bugs Bunny pull the chute and exit him out, and as the parachute comes out, in it is hidden Ringo was the walrus. And there's a couple other things in there that I probably can't mention.
Wait, I feel compelled to point something out.
We're gonna go get our zappers on tonight and watch that.
I want that cell. I want that cell.
Yeah.
I have to point one thing out though about this screen time business of Bugs and Mickey being on screen at the same time. I have gone back and watched the film and noticed that when Eddie Valiant is walking through the studio lot, right behind the bus that pulls up, Bugs Bunny is walking there. Doesn't say anything, but he's in the crowd of characters, and I'm like,
he's just walking through the studio.
So did they not catch that? Did they not have a problem with him not being with Mickey, or was it like?
Well, first, that was my first thing of like doing a Warner Brother character. We just wanted characters walking around, there's we just to make it feel like a studio. And so I was doing a test of Bugs Bunny just walking, and I used that section as a test, the photostats.
Wow.
I don't think he was supposed to be in there, but then we just went, oh, let's leave him in there, and no one said anything. But there was tons of just everybody, all the rules from everybody coming from America was driving us insane. Warner Brothers and Disney was like, you got a call from Disney. Oh, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. We just wanted to be left alone because we had never been, there was only 3 Disney animators that actually went over to England to work on it. And that was Andreas Dejan, Phil Niblink, and myself. And once we got there, we just went, oh my God, this is so free. Because at Disney in LA, you do a pencil test, just a drawing, just the paper shot, so you could see if the scene is working. And then the director would go, yeah, that's, hey, I got it. Instead of him coming in that door and picking up the cup of coffee, let's have him come in through that door and then not pick up the coffee. And you're going, well, why didn't you tell me that in the beginning? And then you do that and they'd go, oh, you know what? He does pick up the coffee. And you're going, make up your mind. I'm losing the spontaneity and also my mind working on this scene forever, and because you don't know what you're doing, you're trying to now be inspired by what I've done in order to give you an idea of what to say to me on how to fix it. Does it work? It works. Let's just move on. And Zemeckis and Steve Starkey, I would show them a scene, and Richard Williams. I'd show them a scene, and they'd go, "Yep, oh man, hey everybody, come here, look at this. That's Bugs Bunny. Oh, look at that's hilarious. All right, go on to the next scene." And I would go, "Wow, I don't have to ping pong back and forth and choke all the fun out of this thing. I just get to go on to the next scene." I never fixed anything in that film. I went from one scene to the next and never did anybody say, "You know what? How about if he does this?" Nothing like that. And that was again, that was Zemeckis, Steve Starkey, and Robert Watts. They were the guys that were in charge of the film, and Richard Williams was allowed to do what he wanted to do, and we all did what we wanted to do. And I left Disney after that because of it. It was like when I went back, I fell right back into the nightmare of doing every scene 500 times, and you're just going, oh.
Dave, can I quick ask who came up with I don't know if you animated this part, but the gag nice booby trap?
I do.
That was kind of the same thing, just spontaneously done.
I think it was. I think it came out of somebody who never said anything, and all of a sudden everybody just went, "What?" Oh my God, that's a great idea. I think it was one of those kind of moments. It's a really good question. I wish I'm having a mental blank on it.
I just thought it was. I'm surprised that Disney was okay with it.
We're gonna give Dave Spafford's phone number out at the end of the show. You can all ask him those questions, and he'll have time to think about them later.
All the secret stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Next question. It's about Jessica Rabbit. Since Jessica has become a feminist icon, can the panel speak to the significance of this femme fatale with a heart of gold archetype?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my greatest creation. What can I tell you? I worked with Dick Williams to design what she looked like, and the image of Jessica Rabbit is so popular that I probably get 10 to 20 pictures a week of young women cosplaying Jessica Rabbit. And the reason why is because she's not your typical willowy woman. She's a little more buxom than your normal woman. And so women who are not the ideal physical shape for fashion can cosplay her and feel comfortable. I did a speaking tour in China a couple of years ago, and I spoke to Chinese animators at a number of universities. And every time I mentioned the name Jessica Rabbit, they spoke it in Chinese, and everybody laughed a little bit. And I said, "Why are they laughing when I say Jessica Rabbit?" And they said, "Well, here she is not known as Jessica Rabbit. She is known as Big Melons." So there you go. My contribution to world culture.
There is a Disney licensing deal in there somewhere.
The watermelon company. Yeah, absolutely.
It's subtle.
I'm just speaking in sort of the Disney. I just like her because she's a powerful character. She is absolutely in control. And I think that that's what makes her in many ways a feminist icon. What I also find interesting, you see a lot of this in sort of Hollywood couples. You saw Anne Bancroft with Mel Brooks, or you saw Shirley Jones with what was Marty Ingalls?
Was it Marty Ingalls?
Marty Ingalls, yeah. And I heard both of them at one point or another say what Jessica said. He makes me laugh. And I think that that's something that's really sort of built into that character, which is essentially a woman who could have anyone she wants. And she's got Roger. He makes me laugh. And I think I think that just says a lot about the character of the character.
And boy,
I think there's power. I think there's power in that.
What an exciting thing it was when once that character got honed in, because when she first started, it was a Richard Williams design, and it was kind of like it sort of looked like a comic book style character. And then before I was even on the film, they were doing some designs, and I wanted to work on the film. So I had assigned myself to just work on it because there was nothing to do at the studio. And so I sculpted what I thought she would look like. And I had kind of put in a little more of the Red Hot Riding Hood.
Exactly.
And then when I came to England, I had given this statue to Russell Hall, and then he took a little bit of this and put it in with what he was doing, and then he rounded it. They wouldn't go for this. This was a little too
sharp.
Exactly.
Pneumatic.
But he had liked the hair and the old style, which was Tex Avery style, female character, and then he had done his own thing with it and made it his own. It was a beautiful, beautiful character. And I remember when in the first time we saw the film at Radio City Music Hall and she came on, that crowd went nuts. I mean, it was like, it was absolutely insane how crazy people went for it when she the second you saw her, it was like the greatest reveal ever. And that was Russell Hall.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that we forget this once again in context. We were all expecting Roger Rabbit's wife to be a rabbit. That's the gag in the movie, is you're waiting to see who Mrs. Rabbit is, and here's Veronica Lake with Lauren Bacall's voice. I mean, just that's one of those unrepeatable movie gags. You never laugh as hard again at that after you see the movie.
It's amazing. Absolutely.
We were probably expecting Bugs Bunny's counterpart from Space Jam is what they were probably expecting. I'm forgetting her name right now, but that's
Lola, right?
Lola, thank you. We're probably expecting Lola.
Absolutely. Next question. Because of the unique animation style, the cooperation that had to take place between huge studios and other factors, do you think a movie like Roger Rabbit will ever be made again?
It's possible. It would have to be something totally new, because I don't think you could really put together a crew of people to actually do hand-drawn animation that quickly. You know, it takes, you know, we've kind of lost it. And there's a little too much math in computer animation, I think, to try to pull it off. I mean, if they were going to do a second Roger Rabbit, but it's possible, but it would take a lot of work.
Well, and it would take a level of interstudio cooperation, I think, in many ways based on relationships, that was sort of an alchemy, magical moment, as you and Gary have said, because there's this guy named Spielberg in the room. I think that was really a lot of the engine that made stuff happen on that production side. I don't doubt that something like it could be done, but you know, it's lightning in a bottle. Are you gonna
Well,
that's that confluence, you know.
One of the best qualities of hand-drawn animation, and the thing that made it sort of feel oddly real, was it's all the flaws in it being drawings. It's all the flaws in one animator from another. The computer has choked that spontaneity, the happy accidents right out. It doesn't exist. There are no happy accidents in computer animation. Everything is exactly how you planned it. And it's it's mathematical. It's all math. You know, there's such a huge percentage of computer animation is math because it's the computer doing it. Yeah, you have an electronic puppeteer kind of moving something around, but the artist isn't affected by something that happened to him in the morning, and now he's working at a scene and he draws an eye really weird because his mind was kind of, you know, upset from something, and then you went, oh my God, that's the best eye I've ever drawn because I wasn't thinking, or I was thinking of something else, and it you know there's these happy accidents that, and that film is filled with billions of happy accidents, and they end up being the thing that makes it, you know.
Dave, you know, it's almost closer to real life because nobody's perfectly symmetrical in real life either, you know.
Exactly. Well, it's why rock and roll when it first started is so popular, because these guys, half the guys, you know, they taught themselves how to play the instruments. They were playing very basically. Chuck Berry, I mean, you know, it's a very simple thing, and it's a lot of the flaws in what he's doing that made it his. And it's the same thing with hand-drawn animation. It's the thing I miss, and it's the reason I did not continue with computer animation. I like the way it looks. I like what people are doing with it. I don't want to do it. You know,
as a collector, completely agree. I can see the difference between hand-drawn and digital. I have to say, if people haven't seen them, a lot of fun are the cartoons that were released afterwards. Roller Coaster Rabbit is one, Tummy Trouble is a second one. Trail Mix-Up, I think, was digital, but they are terrific. They're a lot of fun. Jessica's portrayed a little bit different. She just makes cameo appearances, but as a collector, I was able to grab a few cels from that when it was still available.
Are those at the museum now, Bill?
No, you know, the museum only had X amount of room, so they weren't able to include those. But I hope we can do another one and feature them, because they're pretty rare. There weren't a lot of them released, and I was real thrilled to get them.
Awesome. It is time. So we have one more question for our panel. You all have different entry points and experiences with the film. And for each of you, what is the most memorable thing that you learned from Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Let's start with Dave.
Working with the people who were insanely talented, who knew nothing about animation. But we're very talented. I mean, the idea of Zemeckis going, this is what I want you to do. He's got to do this. I don't care how you do it. Just, I need this, this, and this to happen. And as long as you hit those marks, he was like, done, go on to the next one. And I've never had that on another film ever. It changed everything. And to the point where I found it almost impossible to work on Little Mermaid. It was like, I came back, worked on Little Mermaid for a while, and I was like, I just went, I'm out of here. You know, and I had an okay time on that, and I liked the directors. It wasn't that, it was just the studio. It was missing having Zemeckis and those guys is what it was. And big plus having them, you know.
Gary, what about you? What was the most memorable thing that you learned from Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
I will give you my most memorable experience rather than what I learned, okay? I was at the premiere, Radio City Music Hall, and I had never seen the movie, you know, all the way through, because I guess you guys were still working on it up to like 2 days before it was actually shown. So I had never actually seen it all the way through. I had never seen my credit on screen. So here I was, Radio City Music Hall, sitting with all VIPs, and I was going to see the movie based on my book, and I was going to see my credit. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, life doesn't get any better than this. But then it turned out I got seated with Kathleen Turner on one side and Amy Irving on the other side. And Amy Irving, of course, was Steve's wife, and Kathleen Turner was Kathleen Turner, and they were the two voices of Jessica. And so I'm saying, wow, life just got better. I said, I'm with Kathleen Turner and Amy Irving. Now, really, life doesn't get any better than this. And then again, life got better because Kathleen put her hand on my knee and she leaned over and she said, Gary, are you excited? And I said, Kathleen, you have no idea. So my most memorable moment.
Funny.
Jeff, what about you? Any memorable moments or memories associated with the film?
I'm always sort of in this historian mode because of what I've done with how I've squandered most of my life, as some people say, examining the history and documenting the art form and working with animators. I didn't get to see a Snow White open and revolutionize that art form, or a Fantasia. But I felt when I saw Roger Rabbit, I think it's Cinerama Dome, it opened in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it was being at a moment of history. For a lifelong Disney fan, to see that up on the screen was the kid inside of me going, there is nothing this art form cannot do. This is an amazing, groundbreaking thing that I get to see in my lifetime. And I think that was my big takeaway, apart from my nerdy Saturday morning memories of all of the, Warner Brothers characters and the Disney characters, and just loving that they all lived in this world together on a visceral level. That was great. But in an intellectual level, it was so gratifying to look at the art and the artistry of what animation does and what it is, and to think about what a historic event that movie was. Once again, that's lightning in a bottle. It's a one-time thing, and it's still, even today, it's amazing. That's the thing that's really interesting to me, is how well that film holds up. There's a lot of films that I see back from even 15, 20. I just saw Titanic again, and but I watched Roger Rabbit, a month ago or so, and wow, it works. It just works.
Titanic gives me that sinking feeling every time.
Bill, what about you? Any takeaways or memories or thoughts associated with the film?
Yeah, big time. That it was a revelation to me that animation could work again. Because I grew up in the 40s and 50s when animation was just spectacular. And then I watched it in the 60s and 70s. And I had pretty much given up on it. I think Dave said earlier, I mean, it's important to me that there are people like Dave out there who care about making it look right. Because in the 60s and 70s, I would see the comic books or the coloring books and this stuff come out. Characters weren't on model. Things weren't done well. The cartoons weren't done well. And to see that things were done the way they should be done and people actually cared about it and made it look right, honestly, I didn't think that would happen again. So when I was kind of dumbfounded when the first time I saw Roger Rabbit. It was just the combination of the beautiful animation, the great writing, the book itself, the voice artists. It was amazing. But the best thing for me was that animation could be like it used to be.
Phil, last but not least.
Well, I was a bit of a wee lad when I saw it, and I can just say that for me it was probably one of the top 3 most inspirational films I'd ever seen, to the point of when I was at my senior year of high school, I wrote a noir story, and didn't really realize it until recently when I went back and watched kind of both of them in close proximity, how much Roger Rabbit had influenced my own writing. So it's just a very inspirational story. Again, with what Jeff was saying about the visceral, getting to be in the sandbox and have all your, or in the toy box and have all your toys play together, kind of a thing, and just how succinctly the story is told, executed, and then you just want to relive it again.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. That is our time for the day. Phil, thank you so much for being such a fantastic moderator tonight. Where can we follow you and watch your great content online?
Oh, thanks. Well, you can find a lot of my content at philmachi.com. You can also search for my podcast, Stay Tooned, spelled Tooned, any podcast app that you've got. And there are some video versions of that show as well. And I should point out that Gary, Dave, and Jeff's episode hasn't come out yet, but all three of them have. I've had the pleasure of interviewing them. So if you want to hear more from them, that's an excellent way to do that.
Great.
Fantastic. Gary, Dave, Bill, and Jeff, thank you all so much for being here with us tonight. The Musco Center Creative Fund makes At the Musco Online programs like this one possible, also helping to fund the presentation of world-class artists, ensembles, and speakers on our stage in the future. Please consider donating at muscocenter.org. Please take a moment to let us know how your experience was in the chat. We love your feedback. On behalf of Musco Center for the Arts, the Hilbert Museum of California Art, which is open and you can experience these cels in their great exhibits, and Chapman University, thank you for joining us at the Musco. We hope to see you soon and have a great night. Bye.
Thank you.